Welcome to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax with Nora Devine. Nora's been a property tax attorney in private practice since 2005. She's developed a statewide practice in all jurisdictions in Illinois, and she represents all property classes. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Nora and I are focused on the fallout from the Tyler Technologies implementation problems in Cook County and how technology failures inside the property tax system can create delays, inaccuracies, and confusion for property owners and tax professionals alike. Nora, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
The Tyler Technologies implementation, right? It was supposed to accomplish something within the Cook County property tax system. What was it?
Essentially, they used to use this mainframe system that was really ancient by pretty much any standards. It was called this AS400, and all the different county offices were relying on this framework in order to produce reliable data that would help with getting the property tax bills out. So everything from figuring out what the published assessments would be and publishing those and mailing those notices to then helping the government figure out how to get through their appeal process, to finalizing those revised values, to going back to the treasurer and then having all of the tax rates computed based on, what the taxing districts were requiring from the property tax itself. And then you would then use that number compared to the finalized assessed values, come up with the tax rates. And then you would then get the tax bills out, hopefully. And if the tax bills are out on time, then the government agencies can continue to function. But if the tax bills are late, then all those units of government that appear on your tax bill are going to have to borrow money at very unattractive rates in order to continue paying the bills and keeping the lights on. So it's really like the core of funding local government.
Right. Oh, wow. From your point of view, were there some early signs that the rollout was creating problems inside the whole system as you describe it?
I think there was very few people that could take on a project of this scale. So I think that's why the county ended up hiring Tyler Technologies. They had some success in using Tyler on a statewide basis in order to digitize and make the court filings electronic. So we do have e-filing now in the courts in Illinois, and that's hasn't been around very long compared to other states. But Tyler Technologies was the company that got us through that process, and so it seemed like they would be a natural partner to help revolutionize and update the property tax mainframe. So they also had some success in other counties, such as Lake County. They had gone through there prior to doing Cook County, and it wasn't painless, but it wasn't a disaster either. So I think that they were like, oh, well, we did Lake County, but when you look at the parcel count in Lake County plus how much appeal activity they have, and you compare that to Cook County has more than 1.8 million PINs at this point. So it's just the scale. And also I think that the data they were working with in Lake County was in better shape to begin with than the data that they were expected to work with in Cook County. So they chose Tyler as a partner because, frankly, there aren't a lot of companies that could do a project of this scale. And then there was success in the court system. There was success in Lake County, but early on in Cook County, there were a lot of hiccups, starting with when the assessor switched over full boat to the Tyler system and did not operate the predecessor system in tandem with the new system. There was a lot of difficulty in exchanging data between the assessor's office and the Board of Review. So the Board of Review did continue to operate, two systems in tandem because they thought that was best practice, and it turned out to be something that was helpful and brought some stability to the tax and assessment system at the time. So back then there was a lot of finger pointing between various agencies of, oh, it's not our fault, it's your fault. And Tyler saying it's your fault, you're giving us this bad data and you're not giving us the support on your end that was promised. And there was a lot of grief sent Tyler's way about, hey, we're still paying you, you're now billing us additional sums, and these deadlines have not been met, and these tests are not going well. And early on, I think that was it just got worse from there.
Ugh. Well, these legacy data systems implementations I would say, are never painless. So it's a tough, and you got so many different intersecting parties in this Cook County thing too. Were there other sort of day-to-day issues that really like confronted, like say property owners, others trying to navigate the system?
I think when things really got off track was when they were actually truly trying to use just the Tyler system to get the tax bills out. That was the second installment of 2024. Those bills were supposed to be due and payable September 1st of 2025. And the testing was going so terribly and the implementation was so far off track that these bills didn't go out until December. And that's almost unheard of. It's not totally unheard of, but it's almost unheard of. And by then you have taxing districts borrowing money. It's very costly for government to do that. And you had a lot of homeowners that were impacted by this because if they didn't get that bill in hand by the end of December, that would create questions about whether or not they could write off their real estate tax liability on their federal income taxes. So there was this huge emergency push at the end of the year that they knew that they had to get these bills out, even if it wasn't perfect. And it wasn't perfect. There was some percentage, more than 10%, perhaps more than 15% of the bills that were problematic and didn't go out with the batch of the bills that did go out. So we are still dealing with bills that haven't gone out for the second installment of 2024. There is a list of those as I record this. It's the middle of May 2026, wow. And there's a list out there circulating. I think it's being updated. I think it's available on the Treasurer's website. You could look up a PIN. Let's say you're a transactional attorney and you're wondering where this tax bill is. You can check this list to see if the PIN number appears on the list of properties that have been impacted by this inability of the Tyler system to generate and mail all the bills.
Yeah, complicated. I mean, I could think too, as as a homeowner, potentially, you almost rely on the bills to remember that you've got these things to pay. You know what I mean? Like, oh, the tax bill, or you've set money aside and, you just never notice that the tax bill, and then you're like, wait, where'd that money? I spent that money already, or, whatever it is. And of course, as you said, your tax accountant, or you're doing your taxes and you're like, oh, wait, where's the receipts for the tax bill that we usually write off? Or,
Yeah, the timing matters too, because, you would like to see these bills spaced out equally. So one due, let's say March 1st, another due September 1st. When you've got one due December 15th, and now you're going to have another one due March 1st, you're right. It causes a lot of strain on the average household's monthly budget. It does. And it's also, a fact that the bank escrows were messed up by this. So we have a triennial system of assessments in Cook County. So your assessment is expected to stay about the same for 3 years. And then if the market has increased a lot during that time, you may have a pretty big assessment increase, for that year. And then, so if the bank escrows are not increasing based on the proposed assessment or even the board certified assessment, those increases don't happen until the actual bill comes out. So if you've got that bill coming out 3, 4, 5 months late, you're dealing with all this deferred increase that you should have been paying to your bank's escrow. And now there's going to be like a big catch-up provision. So this really was a disaster for homeowners.
Yeah, that's a long ripple effect, considering, we're in 2026 now. How much of the modern property tax process now depends on reliable digital records and system accuracy?
It's such a good question, because today we still refer to something called warrant books. And people that have been around a long time like me, we remember when there actually were huge books like this big, and they were all lined up on a shelf in the actual county clerk's office. And you would be recording things on the title to the property in terms of property tax information, whether it's the taxes weren't paid, or some unpaid installments were sold to a tax buyer, or what the finalized assessments were. And so you could actually go into an office and pick out a heavy physical book from a shelf and flip through it and look at it. But And you would think that that sounds ancient, but it wasn't that long ago that these books existed, not long at all. So getting rid of these books
They
and
still exist
going
somewhere,
totally
I bet.
digital. I mean, it would be smart, but I don't think they have the staff to update them the way that they used to. But
Oh, for sure, yeah.
it is still a pretty physical process to figure out what taxes are due and owing if a property is delinquent. So I'm not quite sure how the nuts and bolts of that work now. It's my understanding that they are using this new technology to get away from physical records in general. And back in the day, the problem here is that you do have the new technology, but you're still working with the property tax code language the same way that it's always been. And the property tax code itself anticipated this very physical system where you literally would have a clerk take the book down to the assessor's office and be like, here you go, here's the books for the new year. And then the assessor would literally record in the actual book itself what the proposed assessments were going to be. And then this physical book would literally be taken to the Board of Review. And then once the Board of Review got done hearing appeals, the Board of Review would actually write the new number in their own column. And then they would take the book back to the clerk. And then the clerk would then take the book, and then the Illinois Department of Revenue would be doing their sales ratio studies, and based on the same book, then there would be another column, next to the other columns that would show like, okay, now the equalized value is this. So it was a very physical book moving around from office to office type of process, and the property tax code is still written that way. So it's natural that updating it wasn't going to be pain-free just because, the code itself was anticipating this very, very physical process.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it's kind of developed. And at this point, it's just the taxing districts want the bills to get out, and the residents want to know what kind of tax liability they have and whether or not the money they're putting into their mortgage escrow is enough to cover it.
What do you think tends to make the large government technology rollouts in the property tax world so difficult to execute successfully? I mean, is it just that long history of the physical world that it was built in, or are there other factors that you think contribute?
In many counties, you have one supervisor of assessments that's appointed, and you may have a treasurer as well, but you don't have quite as many elected officials and personalities as you do in Cook County. In Cook County, we have 3 independently elected Board of Review members, and they're trying to serve their constituents, meeting their voters like the best that they can. You have 1 elected assessor for 1.8 million pins. Then you have an elected recorder of deeds. You have an elected treasurer. You have an elected county clerk. And all of these people have something to do with the administration of either the assessment process, the taxation process, or the tax enforcement process, meaning if the taxes are unpaid, what happens next. So getting all these offices of independently elected people on board with what needs to happen next it did prove to be much more difficult in Cook County.
Yeah. Well, and, add to the fact that perhaps they're not that well versed on sophisticated computer systems. Also,
the hardest part is not the software itself. It's
Yeah.
data migration, inter-office coordination, testing, training, contingency planning. If old data does not map cleanly to the new systems, or if the offices are not aligned on workflow, the technology can expose every weakness that exists in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. What about, like, of course, mistakes happen, errors occur. How difficult is it to correct? Once bad data is introduced into the system, I would imagine it starts to affect assessing and tax records. I mean, how do you debug or correct what's been mistaken?
There are formal ways to correct errors that have been made, but huge errors are hugely difficult to correct, especially if it gets to a litigation situation. So we'll see if there's fallout from how these tax rates are being computed right now. Right now, I am anticipating that there would be fallout and inaccurate tax rates being computed. The tax rate is a function of the units of local government saying how much money they need from the property tax, and then understanding that number in light of what is the total equalized assessed value for the taxing district that we're talking about. And so if you have an inaccuracy in the equalized assessment, and if it's a big inaccuracy, now you've got a tax bill that's not correct because the tax rate was considered incorrect. So there is going to be litigation by some of these tax rate objection attorneys if they can uncover some bigger errors that have happened in the process here.
All this turmoil, I've got to guess, has an impact on public confidence in the system, right? When taxpayers start seeing errors, inconsistent information, all of that. How do you see that playing out? I mean, obviously there'll be some litigation, as you mentioned, huh?
There was a time that it was kind of terrifying because back when the Board of Review was still running the AS 400 and the assessor's office was running the new system, there were times when somebody would contact me and say, I need help understanding how to prorate these taxes at a closing. And I would look in 3 different places to see what the finalized assessed value was, and I would see 3 different numbers. Oh, wow. And it was just the most terrifying thing. And back in those days, we even had the current assessor was somewhat newer to his post. And for the first time in my career, I was seeing townships being called back and then republished. So in other words, like you may have given advice about a tax proration for a closing based on a proposed assessment that you saw published, and then 2 weeks, 4 weeks later, they withdrew the entire township and republished like totally different numbers for the township. Wow. So that is unheard of. It was unheard of at the time. We haven't seen much of that since, but there's things like that really cause a lot of chaos.
Nora, to the extent that public confidence in the system has been shaken a bit, as we look forward, what do you think needs to happen for property owners and other professionals to sort of regain confidence in the system?
I think in terms of, is my property tax bill accurate? How do I get confidence in that? I think that if a bill comes to you and you pay it, I think the courts are not going to view you as a person with a problem for property tax enforcement purposes. So I wouldn't say that there's a lot of restoration needed in terms of people being worried about, anything down the road coming up to imperil the title of their property or anything like that. And I think that anything the treasurer could do, like the treasurer has done, they have it's very worthwhile to look at it, but there's a public tracker that was instituted so that people could monitor the progress of the implementation, and it's color coded, so we'll put it in the show notes so that people can take a look at it. But it's green is like, yes, this is implemented, it's rolling forward, it's all set, it's working. And then yellow is like, oh, little buggy, still working on it. And red is like, this is off track, we're like desperately working on this. So every week they're publishing an update to this transparency tracker so that we can see what the benchmarks are for this Tyler contract and where we're at. And it was in the news that it was in the news that the treasurer was complained about. Tyler was saying that they wouldn't even talk to her anymore because she was giving them expletive-laced communications and was, very hard on them. And I'm thinking, like, every voter would be like, good, like at this point, like I just can't imagine a voter being upset with our treasurer for being tough on Tyler Technologies at this point.
Yeah.
And then people do wonder, was this contract arrived at fairly? Like, did we look at enough vendors? Were there other options? And also, did we have the power to put some more things in the contract, such as penalties for Tyler if they missed certain deadlines and things like that. So those are the things that I think would be helpful the next time they do undertake any kind of big contract like this. I think the public would like to see that and there should be recourse. I think the public would like to see that there's consequences for these huge vendors not delivering on the promises that they make. And I think maybe there should be some civil action like this. I hope the state's attorney's office is looking at this. The civil divisions should be considering whether or not there's recourse for the taxpayers on the sheer volume of money that we paid out to this company.
Yeah. Some kind of an audit for sure. I mean, they're complicated undertakings, no question, but this, Cook County's not the first to go through it in the world. You know what I mean? Like, so there are ways to improve the process, I'm sure. Well, Nora, we are We're out of time for this episode, but thanks for sharing your insights here, and I look forward to future conversations.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of Devine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax. If you'd like Nora's team to review your assessment, incentive status, or appeal options, visit the website, thedivinelawgroup.com. And don't forget, do us a favor, like the episode, subscribe, maybe share a link with someone in your world who is having questions about their tax assessments. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.